Do you want to be part of something bigger? At Siemens, we use AI to transform the everyday. Our engineering solutions drive innovation and change. We're leading in technology and building a sustainable future. Join Siemens and make an impact to transform the everyday. Apply now and be part of something extraordinary. Visit siemens.co.in/careers.
Today on CityCast Madison. Midwestern royalty is headed to Madison this weekend. Well, maybe not royal per se, but certainly beloved. The touring writer, singer, and rapper Dessa, who hails from Minneapolis, is this year's headliner for the Orton Park Festival. And she is no stranger to Madison. Ahead of her performance, we caught up with the multi-hyphenate to ask about her Midwestern roots, her relationship to performing in Madtown, and what we might expect from her Sunday set. It's Wednesday, August 21st. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Dessa, you're coming to Madison soon. How are you?
I'm coming. I'm good. I am sitting in my Minneapolis apartment. Set lists have not quite been sequenced, but they have been made. And yeah, my band will be convening in Madison for a big show.
Yes, and we love you. You know, you are a true and blue multi-hyphenate. I tried to put it into words, but I figured I'd just ask you, who is Dessa?
I mean, I guess usually what else? I feel like if somebody says like, oh, what do you do for a living? I feel like it can be really self-indulgent to you know what I mean? To spend like a 4-hour white paper.
I give you permission. I put it on.
Usually what I'd say if somebody asks is, I work as an artist. And if they say, oh, what kind? Then I would say like a writer and a musician. But I think fully, I kind of work in the language arts. So almost anything that has to do with language and its utility as like a self-expressive or innovative communicative tool is usually something that interests me. So for the most part, I write songs and I run around the country performing them. I write essays and books, but also like if there's a chance to write an audio play, I got to do that during the pandemic when theaters were closed and all the artists were kind of struggling to figure out what to do with a group out of London called 45 North. And so, yeah, I think, any like interesting artistic use of language and usually I'm in. So
I love it. And you also had a really fantastic piece in the New York Times in June. So I recommend we'll link to that in our show notes. But I did come prepared on who Dessa is. You're a singer, rapper, writer, and touring performer at major festivals, including our own Orton Park Fest. But you've posed for 100 voice choirs, performed with the Minnesota Orchestra, and you had a track on the Hamilton, the big play mixtape called Congratulations.
Alexander, congratulations. You have invented a new...
But so a hot phrase this summer is Midwestern princess on account of the rise of another singer-songwriter, Chappelle Roan. But, you are and will always be one of our Midwestern princesses. You're Midwestern royalty. And I wanted to ask, what has your journey been like trying to make it in indie rock, hip-hop, starting in the Midwest?
Yeah, in some ways, I think I was like the beneficiary of my own ignorance, and that what I knew about the music community was sort of what I saw firsthand. I was a super poorly socialized early teenager, very much a loner, depressive, and then getting involved in the local music scene. So acts like Doomtree and Traditional Methods and High Respect, seeing their shows and going, this is cool. I didn't really have too much of a reference outside the local scene. And then, what I was listening to like on the school bus. So like top 40, top 4 essentially. But yeah, I think for me, the DIY ethic of indie labels that are essentially you've got bands whose members are learning how to screen print their own t-shirts, or I spent a lot of time outside of First Avenue, which is our big venue, right? Like Princess Joint, handing out flyers, so you'd make schedules of like when concerts would get out so that you'd try to hit all of the exiting patrons with a flyer, a handbill for your next show. And it was a pretty organic growth, which is also to say it was crazy slow, but but it was very much me, I think, like following the model that was being set by the musicians around me. Yeah.
Mhm. And so you live now half-time in New York and half-time in Minneapolis. How have you found the New York musical community and collaborators different from the Midwest?
Okay, so my mother grew up in New York and moved to Minnesota. My dad did the fam thing in Minneapolis. But I think that there has always been sort of like a natural affinity for me for New York. I liked the fact that people were more comfortably extroverted, which is
Yeah.
also to say I liked not being
No, you go
scolded.
first. Yeah.
Yeah. I like not being scolded for being loud. I like the fact that my cousins could all dance way better than I could, and I was like good for here and I wasn't good for there. So I always had a crush on New York and a kind of a connection that you'd go in the summers and I'd spend time with my family there. But yeah, I think to be totally frank, I think each has their merits and their shortcomings. I think that the indie scene that I just described, I had no idea how rare that was when I was in it and coming up. Like not every city has promoters who are looking for local bands, has a station like we have in The Current or Radio K. We've got these really supportive like infrastructure pieces. And
Yes.
yeah, and you just like have a community too of musicians who is doing for self. Like, okay, you open for me, I'll open for you. We could head to Chicago and Madison on a long weekend. You know what? There's indie artists in Madison and Chicago we could trade with. I was super impressed, as you know, by your
Yes.
sister's band Fox. And so I think in New York, that's less the case. It's a city with an industry. That's less the case in LA. On the other hand, I think that Minneapolis, as I've experienced it, can sort of have an inhibitive attitude towards people with big dreams, which is to say, like, don't get too big for your britchet. Like it's conflated with conceit to want to try to do something big. And I'm not an advocate of arrogance, but I am an advocate of ambition.
Mm-hmm. And dynamic expression. I love that you said too big for your britches, because I saw you just made a primer video that you post on Instagram for folks in Midwestern on terminology, like what's real, what isn't, because the governor of your home state of Minnesota is Tim Walz, the now vice presidential pick for Kamala Harris, which is wild. Like what is it like to see him get picked?
Let's go. I think it has been so long. And I know this is a sentiment that is not uniquely mine, but it has been so long since politics has had like a ray of excitement and hope and positivity. And I was so stoked that Walz got picked. I think he's awesome.
Yeah.
Is he perfect? No candidates are, but I think he's really strong.
Yeah, and he's got like some colloquialisms and that sort of folksy nature, which I love. And the video is really, really good. I don't know if you'd be able to like share a couple of those, the definitions that don't get it twisted, where you're like trying to be like, just so y'all know.
Man, yeah, I think, so when you say that you're when I'm on the road anyway, if I say I'm from Minneapolis, a lot of folks will go like, oh, like NASCAR. And I'm like, no, that's Indianapolis. Like
Oh my God.
So we got a lot of work to do to put the pin in the right place on the map. But, you get kind of busted for like the Fargo, that long accent or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That to say that doesn't exist. But most of us don't talk like that, at least in big cities. And then, my boyfriend is from the East Coast and I was walking him around in a small town in Minnesota. And there was like a tchotchke shop, it sells souvenirs, shot glasses, bells, whatever. And it was called like Ufda. And he was like, okay, is that like United Federation of Friends of Danish Americans? And I was like, oh my God.
He broke it down.
We have work to do. I was blown away. I just like my blood pumped in the opposite direction for a beat and a half.
Oofda.
Exactly that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I love that. So we'll toss that in too. But, I buried the lead. You are headlining the Orton Park Festival this weekend, which is so exciting. You're touring on a new album called Bury the Lead. What's the project about?
So this was a project that was written kind of at the tail end of the pandemic. And I would say that my strengths as a musician are usually in melody and lyricism. And I tend, as a human being, irrespective of a songwriter, I tend to lean pretty melancholy. But that was a time when we were so collectively well aware of our sadnesses, both individual and shared, race relations in America, everybody like having a crash course in virology, and also just the kind of experiment in isolation that we experienced. So in any case, I was like disinclined to write a hella sad album because I felt like
We get it. It's here.
because we get it. It's here, exactly that. And so I didn't want to not acknowledge it, but I felt like the metaphor that came to my mind that felt apt was what's called a hurricane party. So in spots in the south of the US where you're likely to get hit by a big storm, people who've decided to stay in place will sometimes invite people over. You get a bunch of booze, you get snacks, you batten the hatches, you close up the storm shutters, and it's a hurricane party. And I loved that idea because it felt like our experience of society was so much a storm that there also has to be some party to make all this surviving worth it, right? Like we're fighting so hard to survive. There has to be some just like unchecked joy and fun in that project too.
We had our like COVID pods, and having little hurricane parties all over the place. I didn't know that. I did, being up north as I am.
Okay.
People are. That's really interesting. And I've heard a little bit of that song. That's a good song, Hurricane Party.
Thanks.
Cause it's a hurricane party, and days every other Wednesday. Live girls dance, dead men float. A hurricane party, gold dust, sex and party. DJ says don't hold back because the water won't.
And so, you're set to headline. You'll be finishing out Orton Park Fest. What can folks generally expect from your set?
I'm excited because I have been working with a new set of musicians for the past 2 years now. And it's a really interesting and unusual skill set to have on stage. So I'll be singing and rapping. Like the set, I think, runs a pretty good gamut emotionally. So there's just like songs of absolute abandon, songs to sweat to, songs that, have these like huge soaring 3-part vocal harmonies. Hence, on stage, I will be joined by Aviva J, who has this killer voice. It's arresting. And she plays harp in the set. Which is non-standard, So I was so psyched when when I first asked, like, dude, would you ever play harp in a rap group? And she was like, let's go. So signed her up. Also on stage with me is this really like infectiously charismatic, my bandmate, Joshua Holmgren. And he plays sax, keys, raps, dances. And so it's
another
an energetic stage. 100%. Yeah, hyphens. It's just hyphens. Yeah, exactly.
That's so exciting. And, I think a lot of folks have encountered your music. I'm sure there are certainly some folks that this will be new to them and your work and your spoken word. Is there any chance you can give us like a little taste of that? Any bars you're ready to drop on us?
Okay, because this is a podcast and it's for me anyway, it's the early afternoon, so it's a little bit early for hot bars. I'll do a quick poem.
Okay,
and
thank you.
This one is I put out like a little tiny baby collection of the poems that I sometimes read on stage just in case like the power goes out or we lose sound. It was sort of like break glass, read poem in case there was a tech issue. And I ended up putting out a little book of them called Tits on the Moon. And
I love that.
This is a poem called The Body. Most of your body is water. Also, most of your body is oxygen. Also, most of your body lives in darkness because it is the part of your body that is inside of your body. Some of the water that is your body will leak out through your skin at the gym. If you removed all of your DNA and piled it on the coffee table, it would weigh about 0.5 pound. Your body is yours for as long as you're around, but it will last a little bit longer than you do. Your body comes with thumbs that don't seem particularly special until someone explains them to you. Your body is a spacesuit. You are not viable outside of it. Your skeleton is a puppet wrapped up in its own strings. Your life is a brief parole from non-existence. Your body is a holster for your name. You will have to share your name with many other people. You will probably share your body with some people too. There are only 2 alternatives to death, but we haven't discovered either of them yet.
This is powerful. Dessa, my first time seeing you in concert was at Der Rathskeller, the Rathskeller at the Memorial Union, like back in 2010 or 2011. So a hot minute ago. And I just remember you had complete possession of that room. I just thought, I was like, who is this hyper cool wordsmith goddess?
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Do you remember performing there? It's like an old, like a beer garden-y space, but it's not a garden because it's inside a building and it's German bar. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. First of all, thank you. Obviously, that's what you hope for every night, though it is not, of course, what you receive absolutely every night. But I think in some way training the way that I did, which is just to say kind of piling into a van with a bunch of like pretty physical dudes, where it was like a metabolic activity to perform. There's a lot of like pogoing, just jumping essentially for as long as you can until you can't. And it was an interesting kind of like stage boot camp, if that makes sense, to also find way, because I sang and most of the guys didn't. And so it was harder for me to like jump up and down and not have my voice jog. And so learning to try to find other methods to keep it hold an audience's attention, because it was a little bit trickier for me to do the kind of constant, like frenetic show. I think, although I certainly didn't realize it at the time, I think that is a big part of what's shaped like my approach to stage presentation.
Well, you have the depth personally, but the depth in your work and your artistry to do that. So,
Thanks.
and it's really neat. It was a special experience. I did want to know, like, Madison feels like one of your stomping grounds for touring spots. Would that be accurate to say?
I love going to Madison anytime Madison will have me. I mean, it's interesting. I think it's a place I've visited a bunch of times. I love the cupcakes at Blue Plate. I love
Monty's.
Let's Go. Yep, at Monty's. And I love there's this truffle maker named Coco Va. Yes. I left my own sound check last time I was in Madison to try to speed walk to her shop before it closed. I like coming to Madison quite a bit. I think one of the challenges, probably in a good way, of performing there is like the turnover is so quick. It's such an awesome, vibrant, like undergraduate, college town. So in some ways it feels like, every 5 years, it's a new community. Yeah, exactly that. So probably I remember like iterations of Madison. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do
you have any like experiences or impressions from crowds or memories from your time going here?
I remember. Oh, so there's hop in and tell me if I'm misremembering any proper names. But the I think it's a King Street Festival.
Majestic.
Right, that happens right outside of the Majestic. I think it's called Live on King Street.
Yeah.
Does that sound right? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, we've had Live on King. But actually, they just ended it this year, which is horrible. But they had part of it Live on Queen inside at the Sylvie. So there's a vestige of it still alive. But yes, an amazing, long-running outdoor fest on King Street.
Love it. And like the view from stage is pretty phenomenal, with the buildings behind. And I remember, when there were a particular set of little girls on the shoulders of their parents. And so during a song about girlhood, I got to lean over the side of the stage and, touch the outstretched fingers of these like 6-year-old girls. And that was a moment to like put in the vault for me. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and the backdrop is like the state capitol.
So it's pretty darn stunning. Yeah.
Yeah, which just really is striking. I wanted to ask you actually about that New York Times piece. You wrote this striking piece in New York Times back in June about your voice titled, "Who Am I Without My Voice?" Because you had the unfortunate experience of starting to lose your voice. And in the piece, you said that experience taught you a lot about yourself. You have such a powerful voice and you use it in really unique ways. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about any reflections you've had on the power of your voice and the gift in using it.
So I was preparing for a big tour, lost my voice really suddenly. And in indie music, the margins are not large enough to be able to tolerate that very well. And also you just, you feel rightly or wrongly, you feel the weight of the responsibility about, the other people who are also living on kind of modest margins, your bandmates and your merch people, the idea of not being able to provide them with promised work can keep you up at night really easily. So anyway, so I'm spun up essentially. But I think that part of the lesson in not being able to communicate verbally was a lesson in humility, which is to say, I'm aware of the fact that I speak the language of the country that I live in well. I speak it really well. Everybody has a talent. Mine happens to be visible immediately, which is to say that I reap the social benefits for my talent in a way that I wouldn't if I was like a fantastic tap dancer, but you can't see that at Walgreens. You know what I mean? And so...
Unless you're really trying.
Yeah, exactly. In which case you are losing points for other reasons. And so feeling like I was struggling socially and maneuvering through the world without my one power, which I lean on in almost every human interaction. I really lean on my ability to try to forge a quick connection with people and speak pretty comfortably to most folks, not everyone, but most. And feeling like that vault door clamp down sort of over my mind, where I was unable to communicate, unable to charm, unable to goof, unable to apologize for the, some minor personal space infringement. So you jostle somebody at the grocery store, and feeling like I was on the wrong side or on the outside of so many social interactions. And a reminder, maybe kind of akin to the pandemic, when you realize just how like desperately social we are. The human organism is like, we're like bees,
Yeah, it's a slap in the face when things change. It's like, oh, wow. Every step.
I rely on people. I rely on strangers, and I think most of us do in small ways. And so, yeah, feeling that my kind of like tether to the human social world get briefly clipped, it's arresting and it's humbling. Yeah.
Mm. Well, I'm so glad that you have it back and you're
Me
able
too.
to headline. I mean, oh my God, that's
Me
scary. Too. And, I think people listening are certainly charmed. I'm charmed and recognize exactly what you're talking about, the strength of your language and your capacity there. And you have had longevity in your career. You're going strong. You're putting out new projects. We love to see it. And Madison has a lot of creatives. Do you have any tips before we go today on how someone might go about creating and successfully getting their work into more people's lives?
Oh my God. I mean, I feel like you would have as much counsel as I might on that. And,
but I'm asking you.
But even like the email that you sent, which is just like, I think when we make an ask of someone, whether that's, hey, will you listen to my song? Will you read my short story? Will you be on my podcast? Will you write a blurb for my book? Really thinking, how does this fit into the other person's world? And is there any way that I could craft this to be like a mutually beneficial experience? So when I say that, I mean like, even, if I'm trying to get coverage, just sort of a dating example, but if I'm trying to get coverage from a reporter, being thoughtful and compassionate about the fact that like that reporter has a fulfilling emails to read, is underpaid and under deadline. What could I do to make their job easier so that saying yes to me is frictionless? Even if that's so that like my bio is word perfect so they can copy and paste it into the freaking story. If that means that when they have a question, I write back fast as heck so that they're not keeping their editor waiting and stressing out. And if it means remembering to put their name on the list, providing them the correct set times, making sure your photo's proper, whatever, like trying to find ways in which the person which you are asking something might also stands to benefit from the exchange. I know that's not always possible, but if you can, I think it's the best way to do it.
It's that sort of forward thinking of the other person and putting them first. And thank you for the shout out to my producing. Love that.
Well
now I get to walk around. Dessa, you are so lovely. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And we cannot wait to see you over at Orton Park Fest this weekend.
I will see you there. And thank you so much.
That's Dessa, multi-hyphenate musician, writer, and so much more. If you want to go check out Dessa's music, head to our show notes for a link. Or consider heading to see her live this weekend at the Orton Park Festival. The fest runs this Friday through Sunday. There'll be food, music, and fun at this beloved Eastside Madison Park. Dessa is scheduled to take the Orton stage at 6:15 p.m. on Sunday. Also want to note, Orton Park Festival is a fundraiser for the Marquette Neighborhood Association. We love you, Marquette. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with the wordsmith in your life? All right, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until then, consider throwing a hurricane party.